Welcome to the Beasts Who Made Us podcast. I'm Cori, a dog trainer from Chicago. You may also know me as Venus and Mars Canine, and I talked today with Francis Metcalf of Master of Hounds Academy and the Canine Circus School. We talked today about Pitbulls, protection training, not getting injured, the value of traditional training, and more. I didn't tell Francis this, but I was sick with the flu while we recorded, so if at any point in this recording it sounds like I'm dying inside, I think I masked it pretty well, but I definitely had a fever during this interview. It was still really good though, so enjoy.
Hi, my name is Francis Metcalf, and my business is called Master of Hounds Academy, and we are in the Bay Area, California.
I actually didn't realize that Canine Circus School, that's just your group classes?
Well, we rebranded because basically I was getting pigeonholed into just doing tricks. Yeah.
I see. I feel like a fake fan now. I didn't know the most basic information before we started.
Well, it's fairly recent, so no, you're a true fan.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, let's start from the beginning. Did you have dogs as a child?
Well, my parents weren't dog people, so I dreamed to have dogs, and we did get a dog, but it was a complete disaster.
Hmm.
It was a Basset Hound named Maud,
Oh my gosh.
and um, my parents weren't into taking care of the dog. I was into it, but I was too young to really do it, so it kind of did every novice mistake you could imagine, and ended up like breaking into our neighbor's show chicken coop and killing all these show chickens, and
No.
then us getting sued
Oh my God.
for the cost of the chickens.
Wow. How old were
Um,
you?
I was 7 or 8.
Oh my God. I I was gonna ask now it seems like maybe not the best question after the end of that story, but have you seen the Lassie episode where Lassie's the kid's friend gets a beagle and they're like trying to train, or maybe it's a basset hound, I don't even remember, some kind of little hound, and they're trying to get it to learn tricks and they're like, look, Lassie knows how to do everything, and they're training it and the dog is just like terrible, can't do anything at all.
No, but it reminds me of that thing on that sort of went viral on the internet of, I think, like a golden retriever, like a kid with a golden retriever and a kid with a Malinois
Hmm.
doing some sort of tricks, and the maybe like a recall through food or something like that, and the golden retriever ate everything and the Malinois was perfect.
Yeah.
um I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've trained some beagles to do some pretty cool things. But yeah, it's definitely easier to train a collie.
Right. To train a lassie dog. Yes. Okay, well, that's a pretty honestly traumatizing first experience with dog ownership. How did you get past that into the next stage?
Oh, it wasn't. I mean, it was really. I loved just like attaching myself to like an end of a rope and letting the basset hound drag me through the woods, and trailing behind it, watching where it was going. It had absolutely no care about me, or it was just interested in smelling things. And we adopted it as like an older adult, and yeah, it was rehomed. I think the traumatizing part of it, if I was going to kind of use that word lightly, was seeing her years later roaming the streets, and getting into some garbage, some dumpsters, and going up to her and going like, Maud, it's me. And she turned around and looked at me and lifted her lip and growled.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, so she was a 100% independent bitch.
Yeah, I mean, she had, dogs have lives. just like we do, and sometimes things go well and sometimes they don't, and they have to toughen up. And she was getting into some good food and in a dumpster and didn't want anyone near it. So,
Wow.
I totally understand.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And in your childhood, you also developed an obsession with bulldogs, right?
Yeah. So my next dog, was this dog named Buddy, uh, who, this sort of older punk named Scummy Man, gave to me. And, um, I just, I wanted him so bad. Like, I just love this dog. He was sort of like living in a crash pad, and he was, I just loved walking this dog, and hanging out with him in various sort of crash pad type areas. and we lived in an apartment, and I wrote a letter to the landlord, swearing up and down how I'd take care of the dog and not let the dog destroy anything. And she gave me permission, so I got this dog. And then, from there, I was like, well, is this a pit bull? I mean, I figured out, yeah, probably is a pit bull. And then I got really into pit bulls, and it was before the internet, so it was hard to find information on things. And like older people, sort of, certain grandma types around the neighborhood would call him a bulldog.
Hmm.
And everyone else just didn't know what kind of dog he was. And then I sort of, uh, extrapolated from there that he's a pit bull. And I ordered, from my school library, uh, under the guise of doing reports, a bunch of pit bull books.
Wow.
And they were the Richard F. Straton pit bull books, and I covered them in shopping bags, which is like what you did with textbooks. I don't know if they still do that, but they cover them in shopping bags so they don't get destroyed. So they could be passed on. And so I had like undercover pit bull books as part of my textbooks,
Hmm.
uh, in my book bag, and would just sit there and read and look at the pedigrees and fantasize about pit bulls.
What do you think was so appealing to you about them?
Um, partially it was like their toughness or their like misunderstandedness,
Yeah.
you know.
Uh-huh.
Um, and the Labs and Goldens were sort of the status quo dog in, um, New England, where I grew up. And so dogs really are, we hate to admit it, but like they really are like part of our identity when we really start identifying with a dog. So I think I just identified with this, maligned creature
Hmm.
that's actually really, tough and noble and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay, so you got this dog from some punk kid. Does that mean you're also a little punk kid at this point in the story?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very much so. I was like the the youngest of the punk kids, hanging out with all the older punk kids. You
Yeah.
know,
I just wanted the
um,
full picture painted.
yeah. So I was, probably like around 12. I was just like, even before that, yeah, I was just like, I was pretty much punk from the pre-puberty
Yeah.
on.
For
Yeah.
sure. Okay, and you were saying that like your people kind of weren't able to recognize the breed of this dog. I actually don't know of the history. Like, were pit bulls not being talked about at that point in time? Like now it's obviously like there's 20 bajillion Pitbull mixes anytime I go
Yeah.
outside. So was I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, pit bulls, had went from being sort of a a sporting dog, like basically a dog fighting dog, and a sort of like basically some of them were farm dogs, for catching various large herbivores,
Mm-hmm.
and as things industrialized, um, people kind of had better sense than to keep a bunch of pit bulls around in the city unless they were doing something with them,
Mm-hmm.
and there weren't lots of pit bulls around, besides the fact that, we were maybe an hour away from Colby, who was the originator practically of the pit bull, um, in America, the Colby family. Um, Older people called them bulldogs, and other people really, they weren't. There was like rumors of this mean dog in the news, from the 70s that bikers had,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but people weren't like really fixated on them uh during the early 80s.
Interesting.
Like, yeah, that was a thing that happened later, where there were, a lot of people fixated on them and fixated on saving them, or rescuing them, or all the crazy stuff you hear about pet bulls and pibbles and pity bulls and all this stuff.
Do you think that people became obsessed with saving them before people also became obsessed with how cool they are? Like there's definitely like I live in inner city Chicago. There's plenty of people here who are like I have a pit bull because they're badass. So I
Uh-huh.
know there's also plenty of people that are like pit bulls are the sweetest kind of dog in the world and they all need to be rescued. But do you think that one of those came before the other?
um I mean, I think the rescue thing really grew into sort of an industry,
Mm-hmm.
so everything was being rescued,
Mm,
and it was filling a niche, because I mean, I think even when I first started professional dog training, there weren't dog daycares and dog walkers.
right.
All the information that I got was sort of built around someone being at home and not two people working and the dog being left alone all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when there's an itch, an industry, sprouts up to scratch that itch, and people needed dog daycares and dog walking, and shelters were overflowing, and pit bulls were becoming more, they were getting more media attention, which made them more popular,
Mm-hmm.
and next thing you know, there's a lot of people with various extreme views on things, like they're the children's nursemaid dog,
Yeah,
or they're the baby killer.
right. Yeah, God, I'm just seeing this huge flowchart web sprouting up, and now I have to pick where to keep us on track because you just mentioned so many interesting things, even with the pre-daycare dog industry and stuff too. Okay, but I'm actually going to ask a question that might make me seem ignorant, but I'll explain myself. Do you have anything to say to the listeners or teach the listeners about the difference between pit bulls and Staffordshire Terriers? Because I'll admit that I know that some people have really big feelings about the difference between the two, but I mostly encounter mixes, And so to me, I haven't even really delved into it that much because it's kind of a moot point. So you meet so many of them who have both of those breeds in it. Or, yeah, do you have anything to say about that?
I mean, I don't think I have anything to say which isn't sort of common knowledge
Mm-hmm.
from people who know things about that. I mean, pit bulls. The pit bull is just sort of an overarching term,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't get my feelings hurt if someone calls a staffy bull a pit bull, or an Amstaff a pit bull, or a bully a pit bull, or whatever. I mean, people just use that as a catch-all phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Even pit bull mixes that mostly look or act like a pit bull. I mean, that's fine. You could throw them in that catch-all phrase, but um, the American Pit Bull Terrier um, was a dog created for dog fighting, like the sport of dog fighting,
Mm-hmm.
right? And because they were bred for that, they were pretty terrible with other dogs, but in terms of being um, very stoic to being doctored up, um, just like most poodles are really great about being groomed because it was a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't groom a poodle, like they just turn to a big mat and they would die.
Yeah.
A pit bull is very stoic. Has very high thresholds, and they can be handled and very docile in some ways, and that's part of their character. Staffordshire Bull Terriers were just the British version, and then the American Staffordshire Terrier came from pit bull stock. It's just that the AKC said, okay, we're gonna get this dog. His name was Tacoma Jack, and this is gonna be like the foundation for the show line.
Mm.
So then they were just bred for show. But the American Pit Bull Terrier, as registered by the ADBA, is the the quote unquote true pit bull. But I think at this point, pit bull is just a general term.
Yeah. I don't think that's totally common knowledge, so I'm glad that you broke it down for everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah. Sometimes if I'm afraid of somebody judging me, I'll say pit thing, pit type thing.
I think that
The
works.
pity thing. Yeah. Okay. And then tell us about what happened after this first bulldog that you had.
I mean, what happened after the first pit bull that I had? I mean, he was not good for training. I did train him, but he wasn't really good for training.
Hmm.
But he got me interested, and then from there, I got deeper into pit bulls, and I got a string of like pedigreed pit bulls from ADBA lines, and was really into them, and learning about them. From there, I was living in Chicago, and in the back of this newspaper, I saw this little tiny ad in like fine print in the classified section that said French working dogs trial. And I packed up my pit bull and my skateboard, and I got a ride out to the suburbs, and I saw my first French ring trial and Malinois, and I was really taken back. And it was like these dogs that kind of looked impossibly slight and skinny,
Mm-hmm.
compared to a pit bull at least,
Mm-hmm.
doing these amazing biting and jumping things. And not only that, but they almost didn't look trained. Like I couldn't really tell how they were trained,
Mm.
because their motivation wasn't clear to me. Like if you see a fancy heeling dog, you sort of can see that they're looking up, probably because they got a reward for looking up and walking in a certain way. But the ring sport dogs are sort of, they look a little bit more dead inside, like, for lack of a better term. Like they're just sort of walking with the person, like the person is just like this person that walked out of the woods with a dog that happened to be following him.
That's so interesting, and that made it cool to you. Maybe
Yeah.
because it was more organic seeming.
Yes. Yeah. Because you couldn't see the seams of the training,
Mm-hmm.
and I had gone to Schutzen trials and done some Schutzen helper work, and was sort of aware of, you know judging a dog sort of, their attention, and focused attention while healing.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes really clear, like, if they're striving for a reward or avoiding a correction or something like that. You can see it.
Mm-hmm.
But with the French ring dogs, I couldn't tell, what was motivating them.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, and those sports are scored very differently, particularly in the healing
Yeah.
section too. So that's why the style is so different. So did your childhood obsession with bulldogs lead to you getting into training dogs professionally?
Yeah, it did.
That makes sense. I
Absolutely.
I need to see some pictures of this.
Okay, I'll send you some.
Were you still a kid when you started training dogs, or did were
Yeah,
yeah?
I was, well, so, I had this sort of after school program teach us how to do training, and I learned training, and I kept it up over the summers, training people's dogs.
Hmm,
Um,
that's cool.
and I had a neighbor that had a trained harbor seal, and he did shows in the harbor, and I passed the bucket for tourists, would put money in, and so I had this idea, like, wow, animals could really be trained to do all this stuff,
Whoa.
and that really excited me. Basically, I was any sort of animal thing I could get involved in. I did. I volunteered at a shelter, and would just. They didn't have back then. They didn't have sort of advanced um, enrichment programs and shelter training and all that kind of stuff. They were just like, here, kid, take the dogs out in the backfield, exercise them. If you want to train them, go ahead. So I, trained a bunch of shelter dogs, and, that was all, I was probably like 10 or something like that.
Hmm.
Then fast forward to getting more and more into pit bulls, um, and getting more and more into professional dog training, and starting to like work as a kennel boy places, and seeing how professional dog trainers were running their classes, and like I remember, um I had a friend that was also getting into it at the time, and we would have these like really naive conversations about, like, so, what part of dog training do you want to get into? And like, "Oh, yeah, I'm really interested in protection dog training, or, you know tracking." Like, I had no idea about anything, but, I sort of eventually started settling on, like, protection dog training is cool.
Yeah.
And then from there, I sort of found some people doing Schutzens, and just sort of street protection stuff. And then I found ring sport, and then I got a Malinois pup.
Okay. So when you initially started being involved in protection training, were you working your bulldogs in protection?
No, because the pit bull thing, like, you do a lot of like tugs, and we were doing stuff like chopping a tire in half, duct taping it to our arms, and then having it bite the tire.
Okay, awesome.
Like, we had no idea what was going
Dude,
on.
just guy
But
stuff, you know?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Um,
Well, I was curious too because not that I'm the biggest expert in this field, but like I know that it's hard to find good helpers or decoys to work off-breed dogs in general, of which the bulldogs
uh-huh.
would be included in. So I was curious if you were involved in some super advanced stuff from the get-go. But no, you were working like shepherds, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, basically I learned civil style
Mm-hmm.
to begin with because that was what was available to me.
Yeah.
I mean, there was this book like Keeler dog guard dog training method, which I got, which sort of instructs you on how to look creepy.
Oh, I'm gonna take all of the books that you're mentioning. I'm gonna list them out in the show notes for people to find. I didn't know that Keeler
Well,
had a guard dog book.
yeah, yeah, he had a bunch of books, but yeah, no, there was like, I mean, it's very much historic material now,
Mm-hmm.
but it was good to learn a civil style. It was civil meaning um, that it wasn't based on protection equipment.
Mm-hmm.
It was based on like drawing out the dog's suspicion, which when you understand that, you kind of understand what creates stress and pressure when you do have equipment on,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you could either turn that volume up or turn that volume down and increase pressure or relieve pressure. The French ring training doesn't really have a lot of that. It's more prey oriented. And that was a big learning experience, but it also came with a big upgrade of dog qualities too.
Mm.
The dogs that I were working with before weren't Malinois. They really hadn't been bred for a lot of um, sport and protection work. Um, so some of them needed that sort of civil approach to bring out those drives.
Mm-hmm.
Where Malinois were just sort of born ready to go, and you could just harness their prey instincts and teach them, and just jump right into teaching them all these complex exercises,
Mm-hmm.
and it was much less psychological in a way.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm glad I learned that way, and then when I got my Malinois, I really got my mind opened up. I was given some lessons in the suit by this woman, Cheryl Carlson, um, when I went and got the pup. And, I was like a sponge wrung dry and just absorbing all these all this information. And I mean, one thing I remember is sitting there in Cheryl's sort of like smoky office, and talking about how do people do a send out through the water. I was just so amazed by some of these Campagna dogs, which is like the French sport of it's like ring sport with no field. It takes place in the country,
Hmm.
and I was watching videos in her office, and she asked me, well, how do you think they're done? And I was, picturing all these overhead cables and ways to keep the dogs on track and force them, and she no, you just you have a pocket full of rocks, and you throw the rock, the rock obviously sinks into the water. The dog goes after it and then sees a tug or something waiting for them on the other side. And I was like, wow, like you don't need all these contraptions, or you don't really need to force them. You can kind of create these contexts that sort of build this anticipation to trick them to do these things.
Yeah.
And that was like, there was a lot of seeds that were planted when I got that pup.
That makes sense to me. I mean, basically, you had fallen in love with dogs and dog behavior, and then you got involved in some sports that are very complicated. And it sounds like that was really exciting to you because you got to learn about all of the training techniques that go with that.
Yeah, yeah. I was just like so green besides, some real basic protection dog and obedience knowledge, which was very formative, and I'm glad I learned that way. Um, but after I got that pup and I started training him up, I was able to um, get the name of this retired baker in Los Angeles that was a good decoy and trainer. And, I called him and he picked up the phone, had a French accent, and I was like, awkwardly introduced myself, and he said, no, I have a family, I'm retired, I'm I can't do any ring sport right now. I have other obligations, and I just kept on calling back. And he's like, okay, okay, I'll meet you at the park. So we met at Griffith Park, and he had like an infant in a stroller. And he started seeing my dog and seeing what I could do, and he started doing a little decoy work while he was like rocking the stroller. Um, and started to meet with me weekly and coach me. And from there, I think I really like he really showed me the French ring way and trained me up as a decoy. And I did my decoy selection, and I started entering trials and winning them. And from there, I kind of blossomed into a trainer.
Mm-hmm. Whoa, I love that. Um, I want to jump ahead to the present day, and then we'll go back
Yeah.
then. But I'm just curious because you're doing field hunt stuff with your lab right now, right? And
Yeah.
is that, have you been, do you feel like you felt when you were a kid and learning all of these things for the first time, learning a new discipline lately?
Yeah, I absolutely do. It's been great to, continue learning a traditional discipline, because I've gone through a long period where um, I just I knew enough to figure everything out by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I had seen, I had titled a bunch of dogs in ring sports and helped a lot of people do that. And I have all this knowledge, and through circus school, I had the um, unique advantage of people coming to me from all over the country and really all over the world, like saying, "Hey, how do you do this trick?" Or "I've thought of this trick. Can you help me put it together?" And I would think of the steps or tell them the steps that I knew and coach them on how to do it. So I'd really been learning new stuff, but I hadn't been like mentored really. I was the mentor, and even though I was, learning new stuff and making new discoveries and trying to come up with new tricks and stuff, um, going back to learning a traditional discipline has been really great for me. And I got a coach, and I started following his flow chart of how he puts uh, his training together, and of course adding all my knowledge on top of that and a lot of extra stuff that
Mm-hmm.
I know how to do. It's just great that when you could read books and articles that go back to like 80 years ago, 100 years ago, of people describing what to do, and people who are much your senior, who have, you know, been working with the discipline of, field trial labs, since they were, boys, basically, or girls. And I just been really benefiting from learning about that. I've learned a lot, I feel, about training companion dogs that way, because in a hunting situation, you have to have a certain amount of decorum from the dog, where they're not being a danger to themselves or
Hmm.
other people, which you don't really have in protection dog training. You're trying to, build up their drive and their confidence, and you're letting a lot of things go, which are, which are basically bad manners, for the sake of building a confident animal. And gun dog training, you don't really let that stuff go.
Oh,
They, yeah,
that's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, that seems very, very, very cool. I have big feelings about just being a lifelong student in general, and I think it's good, very good for the human spirit. I think it's kind of like what being a human is all about. I'm interested if it's, you kind of referenced this already, but the old school nature of this like hunting dog training,
uh-huh.
how does it, I'm sure there's a big like vibes difference. And not that you're like a super like I don't think like new age dog trainer is something that anyone says, but you know what I mean. I know that you
Hmm.
are not like without your traditional dog training values yourself, but do you have any, are there any specific things that stand out to you where you were learning or reading about some of these old school training techniques and you're like, wow, we've really moved away from that and maybe we shouldn't have?
No, because I keep an open mind. You don't know until you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there's a lot of, like, shame based mentalities out there, sort of the new agey, don't do this and don't do this, and we know better, and
Mm-hmm.
and you really have to try some things out before you could say that you know better. So, the more you know, kind of the less you know, or the less, or the more you're willing to say you don't know. So I don't really view it like, oh, they're so old school. Um, I actually view, like, these new age trainers need to be a little bit more old school.
Well, that's what I was wondering. That's what I was getting at because I know that I grew up in dog training that was extremely mechanically focused and like admittedly I still love that kind of thing. You know, I love
Yeah.
being like exactly how did you move your body and, you know, what's your timing of XYZ. But I'm actually especially doing this podcast and talking to trainers more, I'm thinking like I think we've gotten really far away from talking about all of the other components of working with a living animal. Even just the idea of like energy, you know, vibes.
Hmm.
Like no one talks about vibes or energy anymore. Like it's kind of a faux pas. So I was wondering if just going back to the old school texts and methodologies, if it's like, oh yeah, this is what we're missing these days.
Oh, I think, you know, I I think there's a difference between, like, super technical, like, non-emotive stuff, um, and just being normal, but not making training into a psychodrama, you know?
Yeah.
So, in terms of, old school training, I always just try and learn from the shoulders who we stand on, and I don't, extend a lot of judgment, oh, they should do this or they should do that. I just do the things that I do and modify them the way I feel like I need to, and then be honest with, well, let's see the results. I don't have, uh, you know, 50 field trial champions and have been at this, so I don't really know. I don't really have a leg to stand on. Someone else who may do something that initially doesn't seem like the best thing to do, does, and they've proven that it works, or maybe the dogs worked in spite of them. But I don't think it's people really get very judgy about this sort of thing,
Yeah.
and I'm really all about traditional training, and I think one of the the places where like this sort of positive movement has aired is trying to replace traditional training with positive methods rather than creating a new tradition for positive methods.
Mm.
I guess what I mean by that is, like if you look at a lot of the sort of more extreme positive training, they're just tackling problems that are really easily solved with corrections, with throwing some food around, um, where you don't see a lot of exquisitely intricate behavior work, like working on cool tricks in those communities. Sometimes you do, but not across the board. I think that is a really uh, interesting and worthy part of positive training. You're never going to be able to use any sort of corrections to, for instance, get a dog to put a coin into a piggy bank or something like that. That sort of finite work comes from shaping.
Right.
That's the tradition of more food based training that I'm really interested in.
Mm.
um, and rather than just trying to replace what everyone else is doing that's already working really well.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, you were saying that you don't see really correction heavy people training high level tricks usually, right? Because I think it sounded for a
Hmm.
second like you were saying the opposite, so I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I mean, corrections will never get too finite of a behavior
Right.
done.
Yeah.
They're usually big things.
Yes.
Long chain behaviors maybe limited to uh I mean, I was going to say like object guard and blind searches and stuff like that, but I mean, all that's balanced. The dog wants something, and then you're correcting them too. Like I've never seen someone use corrections to train any cool tricks
Yeah.
that I know of, at least.
Y- Yeah, that sounds potentially kind of creepy too.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I love that. I love the idea of, I already forgot how you phrased it, but new tradition of positive training.
Yeah, it really needs it. Like, instead of just trying to, use shaping or rewards to redo, like don't pull on leash or something like that. um and like, let's see you train something cool. Let's see you train a dog to do a handstand or do a bunch of service dog style tricks.
Mm-hmm.
That's really valuable, and it really teaches people how to train.
And playing to the strengths of that technique and going
Yes.
hard on it. Cool. I love that. Okay, let's jump back. I accidentally took us on a big tangent, but I want to go back to the French ring thing.
Hmm.
So you were competing with Malinois in French ring, and then you
Hmm.
you did compete with a bulldog in French ring, right? Or am I making that up?
Yeah. No, you got it right.
Okay, cool. How did
Yeah.
that end up happening?
I had titled a few Malinois, and Malinois have a certain energy that can be fairly annoying.
Especially
Um,
French line Malinois.
yeah, I mean, I think all of them. I mean, you're just pretty much stuck with that energy. And um, basically, I kind of wanted to reach back into my bulldog past, and I had seen a few bulldogs that I was really impressed with. This dog named Marley, that was from Chicago, that was just doing street protection stuff.
Mm.
But she was like on the David Letterman show, and you know, her and her handler, Jim Marvigo, had a lot of, like a real bond, and did some crazy stuff. And she was just crazy durable, and great biter, and super smart, and all this stuff. So I had a chance to get a dog from, the first litter of ring sport parentage, ring sport titled parentage of bulldogs. And so I jumped on it, and I got this dog named Gubby. And I started training him, and I titled him in ring sport. Um, and, I think he never, I got him up. I tried ring two with him, and then he had Lyme disease, and he was overheating, and I decided, like, I didn't want to, risk him overheating. But I think what makes so many people remember him was that he worked like a Malinois in terms of, he had really great biting, and really great obedience in the bite work, and beat Malinois on the field and stuff like that. And it didn't look like you were watching some off breed just sort of limp around
Yeah.
after the Malinois.
Yeah, he had the energy.
Yeah, I mean, I trained him, and I think, the for the training, I kind of reached back into, my Pitbull knowledge, worked into the prey sequence, and really tried to bring out, um, the push bite and the carry, and that kind of stuff. So the dog had really good biting form,
Mm.
and a lot of that stuff is done for you already genetically, in terms of you know it was done for you a few generations ago with the parents of Malinois and German Shepherds, meaning
Right.
those traits had been amplified. And so when you get an off breed, and those traits haven't been amplified, you have to nurture them out, because they haven't been sort of selected for you.
You said you were letting him carry more. Were you doing like unconventional reward techniques with the bite for him to reinforce the kind of biting that you were looking for, pushing in?
Uh, I don't know. I don't know if they were unconventional. I think that they were, what I was doing was working. And I think they're pretty conventional nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Because, people have caught up. But basically, when you look at the prey sequence, and then you have like the initial grab bite, and then the shaky snake shake kill bite, and then the dog goes full, and then they carry, and then they break in. As a decoy, when you're working down that sequence, you're trying to, get the best qualities of what you need in every phase, and then phase out the other ones to almost nothing. So with, a dog that's not heavily selected, you're going to have all those phases of the prey sequence in sort of equal proportions.
Hmm.
With something like a bulldog, you have a lot of fight. So you want to tone that down by not like putting pressure on them, right in that sort of part of the sequence when they would shake,
Mm-hmm.
and instead like calm them and funnel it into the funnel the kill bite more into like a possessive pushing bite.
Yeah, interesting. I would imagine that was important for their endurance on the field too. Like you can't be going and biting and going completely crazy, not just for scoring, but you're gonna exhaust yourself, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. You exhaust yourself, and because of the sort of opposition reflex in the jaw, if they're like pulling one way, they can't quite let go.
Mm.
They're just they're shaking, and then they're in the middle of a shake. It's hard for them to listen and and get their jaws to let
Is
go.
that why people talk about the skull shape thing for pit bulls and bite work? I feel like I've heard something that is maybe a myth, but sounds like what you just said is maybe the origin of this myth.
I mean, there's so much bullshit. I don't even know what you're exactly referring to.
I feel like I've heard that because of the shape of their mouth, their teeth hook into the well, I was doing Schutzen, right? So I've heard into a
Yeah.
sleeve and get kind of caught, so it's harder for them to out, which sounds, I don't know. This might just not be true, but what you just said
I
is interesting
mean,
because it sounds like a real explanation of that.
for sure that I mean, any dog could shake too much and they would not perform as well
Mm-hmm.
on the outs. They don't have to have a certain head shape. But I mean, definitely underbites run in bulldogs,
Hmm.
um, and there could be some sort of like, with an underbite, often you see the canines sort of like being a little bit more hooked in. But my bulldogs, they were underbidden, but they weren't. I mean, they could let go just fine.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean maybe they have to put a little bit more effort into it because there's a lot bigger of a muscle,
Mm-hmm.
going down. They have to have the other antagonistic pair of muscles that open the jaw. But that they did just fine with the outs.
Mm-hmm.
I think their nervous systems aren't really built for that sort of control
Mm-hmm.
that you would need to bring. I would put it more on the nervous system than their skull shape.
That's interesting. Did you
Yeah.
learn any other major things from doing that, training wise?
All of my training has sort of been informed, um, you know, by the nature of the material that you're working with, and I always sort of prided myself on being able to work with dogs that weren't necessarily meeting you halfway because they were bred to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just as from a trainer skill standpoint. I mean, I
Yeah.
think when you start anything, it's best to have a dog that meets you halfway or more than halfway, so you could do it. But like if you watch, you've probably seen like Jack Russell's doing Schutzen routines,
Right.
right? As sort of a fun sort of joke. All those people started with a German Shepherd and did some Schutzen routines. Then they got Jack Russell, realized, oh, they bite. And then they trained him to do all the same exercises, but they already knew how to do those exercises,
Yes.
right? Really, for me, you know, being able to see the dog's strengths and weaknesses, behaviorally and physically, and then either as a decoy, amplify them, or sort of neutralize them, or as a trainer, the same thing really. I mean, that's just training, and once you have some dogs meet you halfway, you can start to extend yourself a little bit more because you're more in control of your own training.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
To me, the big epiphany came when I was reading this book about KNPV, and it was describing like how this sort of old breeder, selected his litters, and it broke the litters down into personality types or personality archetypes. And you know once I read about that, I was like, okay, that makes really good sense to me. And I started seeing, how that could really benefit me in teaching other people, like pet dog people, how to work with their dogs, um, and why some techniques work with some dogs and some don't. And I mean, it basically, broke the litter down into leaders, followers, aloof, and shy, and in sort of a spectrum of boldest to shyest. And
Oh.
everyone knows about followers, and most people know about shy dogs too. I think, like, any trainer could train the follower archetype.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of trainers could use sort of positive techniques to bring a shy dog out of their shell.
Mm-hmm.
But the leader and the aloof are, they sort of, they're harder to put a finger on. And the leader needs a lot more uh, sort of stronger boundaries and harder techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And the aloof is towards the shy spectrum, but they're not so shy that they won't stand their ground
Mm-hmm.
and bite you if they feel pressured. So you see a lot of like aloof dogs having sort of a faux obedience where they don't have a lot of social drive, so they're not jumping all over you. They're just sort of standing there.
Mm-hmm.
But then if someone leans over them, the dog gets uncomfortable and could be snappish.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started figuring that out and playing with those concepts, I really started to be able to teach people, like, okay, this dog, this uh, aloof dog, we need to yes, build his confidence, but also sort of create some boundaries around, its aggression or potential aggression. Um, and with this leader dog, we have to like create really strong boundaries. And this is why some of these old school traditional trainers that had a lot of these, really strong leader style dogs would say things like that seem a little bit preposterous, like, don't let the dog in before you,
Mm-hmm.
or eat before the dog, or, stuff like that just seems like arcane in some ways. But it's actually good advice when it comes to, really pushy leader dogs that are self-employed, um, and are just like a bull in a china shop, and are kind of like their way or the highway.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's more how they sort of behave socially, especially the aloof, uh, the aloof up to the leader dogs. Most of our sport dogs are going to be followers,
Mm.
but um, that's once you can make those categorizations, you could sort of like, okay, well, you're doing the same training normally, for whatever sort of discipline you're working with, whether it's a companion dog or some sort of sport dog or whatever, but you're putting it through the filter of what that particular personality type needs.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, cool. Did you say the name of that book?
It's by John Johns, and I think it's just called KNPV. I'll look at it on my shelf. I forget what it's called now.
Cool. Okay. I'll try to find it online too, maybe. Cool. Well, I wanted to ask too, at some point when you were decoying for French ring, right?
Yeah, and Mondio Ring too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. And you developed, is it in decoying that you developed a shoulder injury, or was that from regular dog training?
Yes, decoying, regular dog training, it's hard to kind of tell.
Sure.
Um, yeah, shoulder, hip, back, everything.
Hmm.
You start breaking down when you're doing a lot of dog training, and especially protection dog work for sure.
Yeah, I feel like it's good to tell a lot of dog trainers that because most of us are on our grind. Most of us are
Yeah,
outside all the time, handling dogs all the time, getting jumped on, getting pulled on. Some of us are
yeah,
getting bit. And so, I don't know, I just thought it would be nice to have, more experienced dog trainers tell us to take care of ourselves, basically.
yeah. Well, take care of yourselves. I mean, you basically your job is to um, deal with other people's problems. Um, and that is going to have a fingerprint on your body and your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And um, you need your body to keep working. So all the sort of like erratic behavior that dogs do, if you're not really prepared for, and they yank you one way or they bump into you and all that other stuff, um, especially if you're like playing tug with them or doing bite work, that slowly wears away at you,
Mm-hmm.
and you may develop some pains from like a certain dog that no one will ever thank you for, and you'll never see the dog again, but that pain will stick with you for the rest of your life.
God. Yeah.
um, and and that kind of sucks,
Yeah.
right? I got to the point where like I was thinking to myself, like, am I, is this now a disability? Like, can I not do this?
Mm-hmm.
I had to, clean up my act. Basically, I had to, not drink, not smoke, um, not eat certain things. I had to exercise, get proper sleep. I mean, kind of obvious stuff, and sort of very like good, normal, good advice,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really true. I mean, you have to take care of yourself. Um, and if you're feeling like, oh, your shoulder hurts so much, or your neck hurts so much, or your hip or your back, um, that that's in your control. I mean, first thing, you may have to uh, learn to say no to some things.
Mm-hmm.
Dogs, if you're doing bite work and you're working with dogs that are, you know, very erratic in their movements, maybe those aren't the right dogs to be working with if you have injuries. The first step in any sort of injury is healing it, right? So you have to learn to say no. I can't handle this dog, or I can't, work this dog. Um, and you have to be able to rest those injuries, and then you have to start strengthening yourself. And I mean, even like, and I struggle with this to this day, even though I'm mostly pain free. Um, just from dog training for so long, like I have certain like postural traits
Mm.
that are become like they're so, when I train dogs, like, I'm just like a set of arms and hands and eyes, and feet, and I forget about everything in between, and it just, it's hard for me to not come out of it, um, without hurting my back or something like that. And so, yeah, you develop habits that are really almost, subconscious or in your muscle memory, that are hard to break.
Yeah. How old were you when you realized you had to start taking care of yourself for real?
Well, I mean, I had this, ring sport club, which was really great. And we had a great group of people, and I was in my, you know, going from, my 30s into my 40s, and I think in your 30s you're sort of like, oh, I'm getting a little older. I look a little bit more less youthful, but you don't. The reality doesn't quite hit you that, that's sort of not going to change, and you maybe like kind of embrace the fact that you're getting a little older, and maybe drive yourself in that direction more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then as your 40s creep up, you start going like, um, oh wow, this is really like calcifying. Like I am really getting, achy and feeling, crippled.
Yeah.
But you just maybe still in denial. I was, and then one time I was working a dog, and um, we were drinking, and just stuff you do at a club, and it's sort of like a little party, or like a bunch of Vikings having a party or something. And and then I woke up in the morning, and like I couldn't step off the bed, and I got in the car, and I couldn't turn my neck to the side, and it just didn't go away. And you know it was a wake up call. And from there, I started taking care of myself, but it wasn't until like my mid 40s.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's all start way sooner than that. I'm I'm 29. I feel like I'm already thinking like this is like a moment for me of really like learning how to take care of myself as an adult for real.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things like that's really popular out there are tugs. And, like working with tugs for rewards, and
Mm-hmm.
like tug of war with a dog, you know, and it's great. But it's not going to turn your dog into Cujo, like people used to think. Like
Yeah.
it's a great reward, but if you are using tugs for a lot of stuff, you're just getting shaken erratically, and you're wasting your body.
Yeah. Totally. You look back at a dog training video, like I've taken videos with my dog and then I look at it afterwards and I'm like, oh, that's kind of scary. Like though seeing how my head is moving, with my body being jerked
Yeah.
around, like yeah, yeah, I have a 70-pound Dutchie and I'm actually pretty sure that I'm gonna make sure that my next dog is smaller because I'm 5'2" and
Hmm.
it's been a lot. It's rough.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like the whole tug thing. I really think people overdo it. If I do a tug nowadays, I basically the dog comes and bites it, and I let go right away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do a big swing. Like the money's already in the bank when the dog bites the tug.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the reward has been given. Sitting there bent over, having them shake you erratically is bad for every joint from your hands up to your back.
Oof. Heavy message.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, just like, and the same thing. I mean, you're asking about off breeds, and it's great. Maybe if you're younger, you want to have the experience of training some off breeds or whatever. But like, even within the chosen breeds, like you have to narrow your swath of genetics to the ones that aren't going to mess you up.
Mm-hmm.
If someone comes to me with an off breed now, I'm not doing a lot of decoy stuff, but just in general, like, I'm not going to put myself at risk, um, or inflame chronic injuries.
Mm-hmm.
I like a dog that basically bites full and holds on and doesn't, pull back, because that can really be hard on your lower back. Um, and I try and create that, and if I can't, I really don't want to work that dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so you have to learn to say no, um, or realize that there's just like a time cap on the amount of you know of of stress your body can take, and have fun with it now, but realize that you're gonna have to slow down soon.
Yeah. Absolutely. When I first did my working dog internship at Logan Haas Kennels, I was probably 22 years old, and I was interested in doing decoy work, but the KNPV guys are like sexist. Like they literally don't
Hmm.
believe that anyone but men can decoy, like, quote unquote, the real way. So
Hmm.
it wasn't really offered to me. And in retrospect, I was too shy to push to ask them to, put me in a sleeve or a suit or whatever. But
Uh-huh.
I'm glad that I didn't go down that route. I've already had pain stuff, just doing regular dog training and, just life. And sometimes I think about, man, if someone had let me get into it, I'm sure I would have loved it and it would have messed me up. So I'm grateful that I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, one of my regrets is that I didn't get involved with sporting dogs, like hunting type dogs, sooner, because your longevity in that sort of work is a lot more than protection dogs. And certainly any sort of bull breed or anything like that, like, you know, shortens your longevity even more.
Yeah.
Um, but with my lab, like, I don't even use food, you know, which is nice. It's like, because I do a lot of food training,
Mm-hmm.
with tricks, um, and basically with just, it's nice having a break with the lab where I'm not playing tug, I'm not giving him a bunch of treats, I'm not getting slammed into, I'm not getting jumped on or anything like that. So
Yeah.
um I have a regret that I didn't get into this earlier.
That's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I guess if someone's listening to this and they're newly interested in protection work, I also want to say I don't want to discourage you, if you're really excited by it. I think my point is more so to just seriously take the taking care of yourself thing for real. And if you are surrounded by especially like cool guys who are just really into hustling and grinding it out and, you know, hopping up to club and working 20 dogs in a row, not everyone can do that. And so if you feel like maybe you can't handle that, maybe, it's okay to be like a normal human and not a robot or some freak god of
Yeah, I mean,
decoying.
yeah, for the people out there that are interested, I mean, um protection work will make you into a better trainer, than most any other type of dog training. And especially when you're also doing stuff like pet dogs.
Hmm.
I don't see how anyone could consider themselves a, a an expert in any sort of like aggression, who isn't doing protection work.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite hot takes, so thank you for saying it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you got to know how to construct it so you could deconstruct it. Learning protection work is going to help you learn how to deal with those things. Not that there's some people that don't do protection that aren't also skilled at it, but if you're there learning, if you're there to really learn, and then be helpful to dogs in the community, and protection work or aggression is like a real it really destroys the community when dogs are people don't trust them, and they or they cause trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Protection work is the only way to really get your hands wet and start learning to help.
Yeah.
But you want to go ahead and learn from people that are doing a traditional sport. It'd be nice if the sport was something that's been around for like 100 years. So there's real experts in the field, and a tradition behind it, and then ground yourself with that and those techniques, and be a student and learn about all kinds of other things, um, and experiment all you want, and just and if you think you could become a decoy and work 20 dogs in a day, I mean, that's great learning too. But it's sort of like one of these things, like, you definitely have an expiration date, and you're going to get hurt. It's a contact sport, and it's a great learning experience, but if it becomes an obsession, that can be unhealthy.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Hi, it's post-production Cori here. At this point in the episode, Francis told me that his phone had low battery, and I became very scared that we were about to lose everything, so we wrapped it up quickly from here.
And Cori, it's been great talking to you, and I really enjoy seeing your content coming out, and just like you flowing and having fun with your dogs, and I mean, I just think you have a great way about you, and just keep on doing what you're doing. You're doing great.
I appreciate that. That means a lot.